Hey, everybody. In this podcast, I'm going to talk about the 14th Amendment. And I realize this is complicated, and the reason I know it's complicated is it's the third time I've started this podcast. But I'm going to press forward because the 14th Amendment affects your life in profound ways to this very day and the lives of all American citizens. So I'll try to do it right this time. A lot of moving parts in Reconstruction. I sympathize with you, but I want you to have at least some kind of a sophisticated understanding about this period of U.S. history before the course ends. Okay, so in December of '65, the 13th Amendment passes the necessary three-fourths of the states, and it becomes a constitutional amendment. Slavery is abolished. Okay. So now we move to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And here's the background. It's just what I've been talking about in these last podcasts. What would be the fate of ex-freedmen, of ex-slaves? What kind of voting rights did these folks have? What kind of citizenship rights did these folks have? The key thing to remember is the Dred Scott decision of the late 1850s. Remember, I talked about that earlier in the course. In the Dred Scott decision, the Supreme Court had said that no African American had any rights that any white man was bound to respect. And that was still the law of the land in 1866 when the 14th Amendment was argued over. The situation, the citizenship situation for African Americans was very, very blurry. Not only ex-slaves, but for freed African Americans as well, because in the late 1850s, the Supreme Court had declared that African Americans were not citizens, had no citizenship rights in the United States. So this is one of the things that Republicans are trying to fix in the post-Civil War period. What was the citizenship rights of African Americans? Did African Americans have rights as citizens? Now, Republicans broadly agreed that the answer to that question was yes, that African Americans did have citizenship rights. Andrew Johnson didn't believe this. He didn't care about it. It was not something that he thought about in any way, shape, or form. So this is being debated in Congress. So what you have is in the summer of 1866, just a couple of months before the major election of 1866, of November 1866, that I talked about in my last podcast, moderate and radical Republicans come to an agreement about the nature of citizenship rights for African Americans, and they pass the 14th Amendment. Now, here's the technical thing that you need to remember: that Congress can pass a constitutional amendment. Then it goes directly to the states to be ratified. So a president can't veto it. So when Congress passes a 14th Amendment, it doesn't become an amendment yet. It's a proposal that goes out to the individual states in the Union, and if three-fourths of those states, the legislatures in those states, approve it, then it becomes a constitutional amendment. So the president has very little say in this matter. A president can't veto a constitutional amendment that Congress passes. It goes directly from Congress to the states, okay? And that's very important to remember, because if Andrew Johnson at this point could have vetoed the 14th Amendment proposal, he would have, but he was taken out of the equation. Okay, so what does the 14th Amendment say? Why is it so important? What the 14th Amendment does, it grants citizenship and it protects the civil liberties of ex-slaves. Okay, so that's very, very important. So what happens is African Americans, via the 14th Amendment, the Dred Scott decision is overruled by this constitutional amendment. Dred Scott decision of the late 1850s, I think 1857, had said that no African American had citizenship rights, slave or free. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution voids this Dred Scott decision and grants African Americans citizenship rights. Okay, that's a significance. It's cleaning up the mess that the Dred Scott decision had made. Now, this is the other important thing, and this is one of the aspects of the 14th Amendment which is still important to this very day. The first section of the 14th Amendment declared that all persons born or naturalized in the United States, except Indians, and that's a whole nother topic which I'm not going to go down. Indians were excluded from the 14th Amendment. But I can't really talk about that in a lot of detail, but I do want to note it. So again, the 14th Amendment, which passed Congress in the summer of 1866, declared that all persons born or naturalized in the United States, except Indians, to be national and state citizens. So if you're born in the U.S., you're a citizen of the U.S. And if you've been paying attention, and some of this might be true for some of you or your family or friends from personal experience, that if you're born in the U.S. grants you citizenship rights. This is what's called birthright. And it's a very significant issue in 2016 because of questions of immigration, the debates over immigration. Well, the 14th Amendment declares quite clearly that anybody born in the United States, no matter where their parents are from, are American citizens, U.S. citizens. Now, the guys that wrote, the members of Congress that wrote the 14th Amendment weren't thinking about immigration policies in 2016. But nonetheless, this is an important implication of the 14th Amendment. Now, to go back to what it meant for African Americans, it gave African Americans citizenship rights. That these citizenship rights could not be denied. And here's what the Constitution said, that nobody, no person who was a citizen could be denied life, liberty, or property without due process of law. This is hugely important in 2016 and ever since the 14th Amendment was written. The phrase due process of law, it just undergirds our judicial system. You can't arbitrarily lose your rights, lose your freedom, unless there's some kind of process that's been created and that's been verified by courts as constitutional. So due process of law is not only significant for African Americans, for ex-slaves in the period after the Civil War, this idea that no citizen can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. This protects you if you're a citizen, and I'm assuming most of the class are citizens, maybe some aren't. I know there's a student in the class from Great Britain. But this protects all U.S. citizens from arbitrary justice, this due process of law. And that every American citizen had equal protection under the law. So this is hugely significant language that offers protections to American citizens to this very day. Although it was designed to offer ex-slaves protections, the Supreme Court has interpreted it in such a way that anyone who is a citizen has these same protections, due process of law and equal protection of the law. So what happened is that the Constitution now guaranteed the principle of equality before law, regardless of race. Now, we know that things have not worked out this way in practice, but this is the aspiration of the 14th Amendment. that there's the principle of equality before law regardless of race. This principle was enforced by the national government, by Washington, D.C., not by state governments. And this was very important because state governments, especially in the South, but not only in the South, were deeply, deeply racist. So what the 14th Amendment does, it creates a category of a national citizen that trumps being a citizen of Texas or being a citizen of Florida or New York. That as a citizen of the United States, you have rights that are national in scope. So if you're getting denied these rights by Florida law, well, that Florida law is unconstitutional. And so the 14th Amendment permanently transformed the definition of American citizenship by granting this idea of national citizenship that trumped state citizenship. And today that we live under a constitutional system that's shaped by the 14th Amendment. So the 14th Amendment, hugely important in granting rights, due process of law, equal protection of the law. But one of the things that's interesting about the 14th Amendment is the language, and I'll read it to you now. The executive or the members of the that's all too detailed. That male inhabitants of any state being 21 years old and citizens of the U.S. cannot be denied their rights. Okay, this drove women crazy. Women suffragists, women who were promoting equal rights in the 1860s, many of which had started their political agitation as abolitionists before the Civil War. They were furious that the 14th Amendment guarantees equal rights, due process of law, equal protection of the law to males. It's the only time in the Constitution that the word male is used. Now, of course, the 14th Amendment has been broadened to include females. But at the time, it only spoke of males. And women suffragists, what they have is you have a real break. There's a lot of anger among women suffragist equal rights proponents about the 14th Amendment, and they feel like they've gotten stabbed in the back with the 14th Amendment by the inclusion of the word male in the 14th Amendment. But if we fast forward to 2016, the 14th Amendment, due process of laws, equal protection of the laws, national citizenship, anyone born in the United States is a full citizen. It applies equally to men and women in 2016. I think, do I keep saying 2014? I don't know what I'm thinking. So that's the takeaway point that I want you to leave the class knowing, that the 14th Amendment, which was passed to guarantee protections for African Americans, also offers protections that exist for all citizens of the United States, very profound protections to this very day.